What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting the Fins, part of the Three Extra Carry podcast feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. As always, this show is brought to you by ThompsonCigar.com. Use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more on Thompson Cigar. Once again, use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. The Miami Dolphins have lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers and are now out of playoff contention. They are 6-8. Coach, my co-host, I think going back to our pregame podcast, we kind of saw how this game would turn out, especially if the Dolphins could not be successful in running the ball. And you know what? Looking at the metrics in the first quarter, the Dolphins had a 67% offensive success rate. They had the best EPA per rush in the first quarter of all teams in week 15. They were getting almost 8 yards per carry and only did 3 runs in that entire first quarter. I feel like they should have stuck with it. They could have gotten more than 3 points within the first half. But ultimately, Mike McDaniel outsmarted himself. And combine that with Tua Tagovailoa's performance in the first half. uh, I mean, what more can you say about these Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we talked about it in the pregame show, and at some point, one of these teams was going to be able to stop the run and to make Tua be the one that has to beat them. And that happened tonight with the Steelers. And, they weren't able to do that. In terms of the volume of rushing, I mean, to add a little bit of context there, I think there was only 20 plays in the first half in total, which is, probably about 10 to 15 plays less than your normal first half for offense. So, limited number of plays in general, but still, more there was more of an opportunity to run than what they did. Didn't feel like they were really committed to it. In a way, it almost felt like the Steelers were ready for a lot of the play action stuff. Like they weren't selling out to stop the run. I think the way that McDaniel and Tua thought that they would, it felt like outside of that first play that went to Julian Hill, after that, it seemed like every time they went to those play action passes off of the run game, that Pittsburgh was able to take away those first reads for Tua. And from there, Tua was not able to adjust from that. A little bit on both, a little bit on Tua, a little bit on McDaniel. Didn't feel like McDaniel called his best game, but sometimes you need the players on the field to be able to overcome some of that. And Tua and the passing game in general was not able to do that at all tonight.
I think, we talked about it. This Dolphins offense is such a big front running team that they need to be able to get off to a hot start. And they looked like it within the first 3 plays of the game and then fell flat. They couldn't score in the first drive. And I felt like that's where the game was. I was thinking, like, oh boy, the last 4 or 5 games, they were able to score in the opening script. Now that the wagons fell off on the first opening script, the second drive of the game was also a no score. So now it's a 0-0. Now the Dolphins are right here stagnant, and the offensive efficiency is slowly going downhill. And it puts a lot of stress on the Dolphins defense as well. They were on the field for about 31 plays in the first half. Uh, Aaron Rodgers in the offense, they were getting yards in the run game. They were dicing and slicing through short yardage. They were getting beat by Jonnu Smith and Darnell Washington. Let's talk about this Dolphins defense now, because they were doing really well in the first half. They were tackling, they were playing really, really hard. But then as the game went on, they were getting gassed. And it's what led to all of the points the Steelers scored, especially coming out of the second half.
Yeah, I thought the best thing that the Steelers did, they adjusted to what the Dolphins defense was doing. But I thought that one of the best things that Aaron Rodgers did was being able to change the tempo of the offense. Right, they came out just kind of a standard tempo to start, and the Dolphins were playing that very well. And then as you got to the end of that second half and into the third quarter, they really picked it up, and Aaron Rodgers was able to, get them with 12 men on the field, was able to, get them to jump off sides at times, was able to quick snap them, right? It wasn't always that they were um, going deep into counts with the hard counts. Sometimes they would snap it quickly, and they were constantly looking for opportunities to get the Dolphins substituting. Like the Steelers didn't feel like they were substituting a lot on offense, which meant that they didn't have to let the Dolphins substitute defensively. When the offense subs somebody out, the defense they have to give the defense the opportunity to match those substitutions. But the Steelers were not doing that. So and the Dolphins wanted to still be able to, they have a lot of different personnel packages they like to go to on defense. And by Aaron Rodgers getting up there to the line, even if he wasn't snapping the ball right away, just by getting up to the line really negated the defense's ability to do that. So when when you have that volume of substitution packages defensively, you're going to have a package that the offense wants to go against more than others. And it felt like when the Dolphins got into some of those packages that the Steelers were able to keep them in there longer than what the Dolphins would have liked. So I thought that was the best thing that they did, but overall, just a better job adjusting throughout the game. Right, the Dolphins defense played very well to start the game, and I felt like the intensity was there throughout most of the game. You go to that DK Metcalf touchdown. There was definitely some questionable stuff there, but I don't think that one thing that I was encouraged by was that it didn't feel like the cold was a huge factor in this one. I thought it was just a better team beating a worser team in tonight's game because the Dolphins defense was coming out. They were hitting, they were gang tackling, and they weren't necessarily it wasn't always the first guy making the tackle early in the game, but early in the game it felt like even when a tackle was missed, there was that play with I think Jack Jones came flying up on one of the running backs and missed the tackle, but Chop Robinson was there to clean it up. And there was a lot of that. You weren't getting the first tackle, but there was somebody there to clean it up. And that was the part that kind of seemed to fall off in the second half, is that there wasn't that next guy to clean it up. So when the first tackle didn't get him down, right now they're getting back up to speed and tough to tackle.
Yeah, and I think the other thing was, and you mentioned the substitution packages, that Anthony Weaver likes to do that, especially with the defensive line. And, Aaron Rodgers caught that, especially, on that replay for 12 men on the field, which,
Yeah.
by the way, was horse crap. Because I've never seen a replay happen for a potential penalty when it was never really called. Um, but you're right. Aaron Rodgers did really well with his cadence, did really well with the tempo, especially early on to catch the Dolphins defense off guard. Jordan Brooks played one hell of a game. I felt like early on the defensive line was getting the work, but the Steelers offense adjusted. And, I said this in the OnlyFins chat where it feels like if the Dolphins can't score early on in the first two drives of the game, if they can't get out to a 10-point lead or at least score 10 to 14 points, the Steelers can go right ahead, milk the clock, score at the end of the half, and then come back and score at the beginning of the half. And I wrote down it was hashtag scripted, and it pretty much was that. I mean, you can already tell that whenever the national media heads are talking about the Dolphins, about Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins running game, it usually falls flat within, the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. It's like, they jinx us, but, us as, analysts and podcasters watching this team day in and day out, learning what this offense has been for the last 4 years, what Anthony Weaver's defense has been for the last 2 years, We know the strengths and weaknesses, and we can see the script playing out even before the plays happen on the field. It's very frustrating to watch when you know what the solutions are. I mean, take a look on that 3rd and 1, and coach, you posted it up on Twitter. 3rd and 1, 11 personnel, shotgun base. Okay, fine. You have your line at the line of scrimmage, but what is the blocking scheme going to do out of a gun personnel on 3rd and 1? Meanwhile, the defensive front, you have 7 to 8 guys on the line. What is your blocking scheme going to look like out of a gun personnel? That's something you do in college, not in the NFL. Once that fell flat, you lose 3-4 yards, and it's what, 4th and 5? You could have converted on a 23-22 personnel 3rd-and-1 run with Ollie Gordon and him not having to be moved back. Like, it's just outsmarting yourself. And this is the thing with Mike McDaniel. He falls into these traps in these games, in these primetime games, in these must-win games. And then it looks bad when the Dolphins quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, namely, can't get it done. And we'll talk about this after break. And what does this do? The defense is trying their best to stop, but they're getting gashed. They've been on the field for 40, 50 plus plays. Now you're behind. You have to pass. You're getting out of the second half. Now it's 14-3. You're down by 2 scores. This Dolphins offense cannot function by 2 scores. We have not seen that this season at all. We've seen them be ahead by 3 scores and still lose, as evident by the Carolina Panthers game. Do you really think that serves as confidence to people watching, much less for the players on this team?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that 3rd-and-1 play to Ollie Gordon, and I'll have to look at it when the all 22 comes out. Maybe a safety had walked down late there, but I felt like the main factor there was that there was no threat of a passing game, right? That we were not able to complete those 3rd and short plays, and so the result of that is that you get Patrick Queen able to come in on a free blitz, because that's a situation that you know even if he's not blocked, as long as he's not timing up the snap count and flying through there, then maybe you have a chance with Ollie Gordon versus a linebacker in the hole. But when the defense knows that that's exactly what's coming, they walk down too many guys in the box, and then you choose not to block the linebacker at the point of attack, then that's the kind of thing that you're going to get. And like you said, this offense has not shown the ability to play from behind. The decision to take the ball to begin the game, it kind of feels like a necessity, because like you said, they have to get ahead. They have to play with the lead, right? But the flip side of that is that you lose the opportunity for the most important part of a football game. Like we've talked about this in the past, that middle 8, right? The last 4 minutes of the first half, the first 4 minutes of the second half. A lot of times games are decided there, regardless of how ugly a game gets early, or how it goes late. Those middle 8 quarters, if you can double down the way that the Steelers did, a lot of times that's going to lead to a victory. So just a lot of little stuff. I tweeted about Waller later in the game, right? You have a big target like that. Why did it take us until the fourth quarter? Just throw the damn ball up to him.
Where was that? I mean,
Like,
okay, you're playing against prevent defense. They're not trying to give up big plays, but where was that in the first
yeah, I
half?
don't.
Why are we still throwing orbit screens to Devon A-Chain on first down when you're behind? Like, you can literally see the motion. I can literally see the Steelers defensive backs calling the play out, and Tua is still throwing it. Why are we getting out of the huddle so late? Like, there has to be some type of overhaul with the passing game. Now, look, I get it. Tua has regressed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after break. Tyreek Hill is not on this offense, so you have to change the passing game. You still have Jalen Waddle. You have Darren Waller. You have Cedric Wilson again. Now, he's not as bad as Nick Westbrook-Akine, but He's got the speed. He can be a little bit of a threat as well. But what are these passing concepts? I mean, you take a look at that Tua interception. You have a two-man play action pass, no one to threaten the flat. The corner is playing the flat, just working his way back, because that's what the corner is supposed to do. You're taught in coverage, if you have the flat assignment and no one's in your area, keep dropping back. Keep dropping back and close that window. Now, Tua throws it, doesn't set his feet, he's not in balance, and the ball is wobbling way up in the air, and Asante Samuel Jr. is able to make that pick, right? The next drive over on a play action pass out of 21 personnel, once again, two-man play action route concept, and no one is open. Okay, you have your protection there, but if no one's open, who's going to how is Tua going to be able to throw that ball? And instead, he takes a sack. Took a lot of sacks in this game as well. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about Tua and McDaniel, but this passing game needs a gigantic overhaul in the offseason. If your entire passing game was reliant on Tyreek Hill and Tua communicating, and you didn't factor in Jalen Waddle, didn't factor in Darren Waller, who you got undrafted, and you're basically your offense is running through Devon Achane, a running back. There's systematic failures already midway through the season, and still can't figure it out, can't fix it.
Yeah, it feels like this passing game, it has to you have to throw within the scheme, right? Within the timing of the offense, because anything outside of that just turns into a complete disaster. And that's kind of what I was getting at with Waller, was just, sometimes when Tua starts to scramble a little bit, you have a guy like Waller, just throw the ball up to him, let him make a play, right? Split him out, make them decide whether they're going to move Jalen Ramsey out there or whether they're going to cover him with the corner. If they cover him with the corner, run a fade and throw it up to him, right? Just do stuff like that. You talked about the two-man routes. When you go to the heavy packed with Brunskill, you lose an eligible there. We have talked before about that balloon or escort swing where they swing Achane out and then have Ingold in front of him. Like Ingold is just a blocker in that situation. He's a eligible receiver by label, but he's not looking to catch a pass. He's looking to get out there and block. So you just have a ton of stuff like that where you are eliminating the options. And, and like you said, we're going to talk about Tua more, right? But I don't know whether giving him two more options is better or worse, but seeing him with only two options and seeing how limited he is moving around in the pocket is just a recipe for disaster, because you do get those situations like the interception where you don't have a choice, right? I mean, your only two choices there are to try to throw it up, right? And it was an awful pass. Feet were not set. It was short, and the corner played it well, right? Or you take a sack. Like you have to be able to build out a passing game that has more options. What's that?
Or you throw the ball away.
Well, he was still in the pocket, so I don't know how well he could throw the pocket away or throw the ball away. But yeah, there just has to be more options there, and I don't know whether that's a Tua thing or a McDaniel thing. That there are just not the options once the play gets off schedule, and that just seems to be a major limiting factor with this passing game, regardless of where that blame falls.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break and shout out OnlyFins. $2.99 just to read whatever Alf, CK, Simon does. $4.99 for all access, where you get my opinions throughout the game, my thoughts, more advanced analytics that we don't talk about on the podcast or even on Twitter. Coach with some all 22 films, some breakdowns as well on there that he does not put on YouTube, and his unfiltered thoughts. So once again, join OnlyFins. It's going to be in the link below if you're watching on YouTube. It's also going to be there on Spotify and Apple and Red Circle. If you are going to join OnlyFins, join on a desktop. Avoid the iOS Apple upcharge. On Android, you will not be upcharged, but it is better if you do it on a desktop. $2.99 for read only, $4.99 for all access per month. Join now at OnlyFins. That's discord.gg/OnlyFins. All right, we're back. Speaking of OnlyFins, I was pretty doom and gloom even before the game. I've been I can practically tell what an offense is going to look like after the first drive. I mean, you can tell what this game is going to look like with the Dolphins. And it's like play after play, sequence after sequence, drive after drive. All hits, no misses by me. And Coach, I think you can say the same for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you get a very good feeling early in the game how things are going to go. I actually expected Tua to play a little better because it didn't feel like he got hit too much early. Felt like he did a good job avoiding some of those, and I thought that would be a significant factor. How the pass protection held up for him. I thought it did okay early in the game for him, but as the game went on, it was clear pretty early that if this game did get beyond a touchdown, that you might as well just shut it down at that point. And I mean, you saw it in the fourth quarter. I mean, look at the way that Troy Aikman was talking about Mike McDaniel and how ridiculous the play calling was there. It was obvious that McDaniel had thrown in the towel very early on the game. And, I don't know if part of that was him trying to protect Tua from, the catastrophic hits that we've seen in the past. But, it was sad to watch the team give up, basically in the third quarter, just conceding a win at that point.
Yeah. Let's touch on the defense a little bit. We talked about them in the first half of the show where they got off to a great start. But you got to get the sense that Anthony Weaver's defense is very easy to figure out when he plays average to above average quarterbacks instead of the likes of Brady Cook, Marcus Mariota, even though Marcus Mariota almost led a comeback. Tyler Shuck, when he almost led a comeback as well. Bryce Young came back on this defense as well. And Bryce Young is very streaky, hot, and cold. You can also talk about a lot of the games from last season during Anthony Weaver's very first season. But Aaron Rodgers was thrown to whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and missed, one pass in the first half. I think he missed 4 passes overall in the game, was just slicing and dicing this entire defense, which also kind of blows my mind. You're playing soft zone. You want to play what's in front of you, and Aaron Rodgers says, okay, dump off, dump off, dump off. And now you're tackling. You continue to do that, they are going to extend drives on third and short. The Dolphins defense lost the game on second downs, especially when they played soft zone, because guess what? They were getting yards and they were successful on second down. I got to go find the stats a little bit real quick, or I might find it tonight, but it felt as if they had almost 75% success rate on second downs. They were 0 for 6 on third downs early on. Don't get me wrong, but they were 3 for 3 on fourth downs. And we know this Dolphins defense is the worst defense in fourth down conversions. And I just knew it. I was like, oh God, that's how they're going to be extending drives. That's how this Dolphins defense is getting gas no matter what. The drives just keep getting extended. And if the Dolphins offense, namely Tua, Mike McDaniel and the offense cannot score, they're not putting pressure on Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers offense to score and get it done or even make mistakes. You saw it once the Dolphins started scoring in garbage time. The Steelers offense was like, okay, what do we do now? It looks like they're scoring. We have a little bit of time left. Is there actually something we can do? They really couldn't do anything after that.
Yeah, and again, going back to the tempo piece of it, another benefit that you get from that for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers is that when you get up to the line quickly, you prevent the defensive coordinator from getting into some of those exotic blitzes. When an offense snaps the ball, tackled, and then gets right back up to the ball, you are forced to essentially line up in a vanilla defense. Like you've got a small package of plays that the players on the field know that you can get to right away, but you can't sit there and get the personnel that you want in there. You can't dial up the blitzes that you want. You get into that scenario where you're playing against a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers who gets up there, and especially when you don't have a call in there to disguise something, he's going to know exactly what he's looking at and be able to pick that apart over and over again. And that's what we saw. We saw
And,
Aaron Rodgers getting up to the line, and then you were saying about the second down stuff, and you're spot on with that. You cannot live in a third and short situation defensively against a team like the Steelers because they have a very good the tush push quarterback sneak, whatever you
they
want
have
to
a
call it,
very
when they
good
line
and
up.
very young offensive line
Yeah.
too, coach.
So, you can't
I
get into
was
that
I was
situation.
essentially surprised early on that the Dolphins were getting home or pressuring Aaron Rodgers with 4 very early on. I was like, "What is this?" I thought the defense had turned a corner, but once again, coach, how I mean, I understand with the tempo, playing vanilla and trying to do these exotic blitzes, but you don't run exotic blitzes against Aaron Rodgers. He can see that coming, and the Steelers' offense is, again, death by paper cuts. So, how do you defend against an offense like that with what Anthony Weaver has on the field?
Well, it's not so much exotic blitzes as much as it's just being able to disguise your blitzes. Because, like you said, he's going to be able to get out there. He's going to pick up if he knows what it is, he's going to pick it apart, and he knows almost everything that you can do. Right. So it's not, it's not bringing a safety and dropping defensive tackles. It's not stuff like that. It's just finding ways to hide who's coming on the blitzes. But when he gets up to the line, you don't have the opportunity to call those. Then you don't he knows exactly what it is, right? It's going to be, something basic, a cover 2 man, a cover 3 zone, something like that. And in those situations, you kind of have to depend on your Jimmies and Joes being better than the other teams. And the Dolphins just aren't right now, right? I mean, look at DK Metcalf did not um, put up monster numbers in the game, but in key situations, Aaron Rodgers just knew where he was going to be and was able to get the ball to him. Same thing with, um, you know, Washington, the tight end, right? Didn't catch a ton of passes, but he knew where to drop it down. And where you flip that over to the Dolphins and you look at how long they were in the huddle before they came out, and then you get the stuff like there was a slant to Waddle where a defensive end dropped into the window and knocked it down. And even if he hadn't, there was a safety that was jumping the route. Like, so that's the difference. When you can get up to the line, you can keep them in vanilla defenses. You can, hit a slant or a seam, right? We saw the one to Metcalf where they were in like a Tampa 2 coverage where Dodson was bailing out to the middle third and Metcalf just replaced him there. When the offense gets up to the line quickly and the quarterback can diagnose it, that's the kind of easy completions you get. Whereas when you're the Dolphins and you're
Yeah.
in the huddle until 10 seconds left, and then you get out there and the defense can get everything together and set it up exactly the way they want it, and then they can, kind of force you into what they want to do. So that,
Especially when you can't change plays at the line
right.
with less than 10 seconds. And here's the thing, the Steelers' offense was consistent, not explosive. On the other hand, the Dolphins offense was relying on explosives to get the job done tonight compared to the last 4 games that they won where they were very consistent. And here's the thing, Miami has no semblance of a 2-minute hurry up offense. They can't do that. It's always a 7-minute long play drive. You ask them to, and you ask Tua, and now we're going to start the topic of Tua. You ask Tua to create something out of thin air, and he can't. Whether if it's a limitation on his physicality, he's not as mobile, even though if he would have ran for the first down, I mean, that would have been great, but he can't. Can't slide properly, can't escape sacks, can't break the pocket, can't get an extra 3-4 yards on to get a first down. Uh, can't necessarily set his base right. And one thing I noticed is that on a lot of his interceptions, you notice his footing is not where the football is supposed to go. He's not setting his base, he's not setting his feet. His body mechanics are totally off, completely off. I don't know what happened to him this season, whether it's mental degradation, whether if it's physical degradation, or he's just not into it anymore. I have never seen this from Tua Tagovailoa, and this is his prime years. He should be getting better every season, and he has. Last year he wasn't healthy. This year he's healthy, but he's regressed a ton. This is not the Tua Tagovailoa we know, we've seen, and what some of us love. He looks bad. For the first 3 quarters, he was 6 of 10, 75 yards, an interception. And then fourth quarter, 12 of 15, 2 touchdowns. He looked like prime Brady in garbage time. Now look, you can stat watch, you can do everything. Those garbage time stats do not matter. Okay? They threw the ball 35 times tonight with only 16 rushes. I get it. They were behind by 3 scores, or 2 scores coming out of the half, and then it went to 3 scores. But you got to be better, especially if you want to pass the ball, Mike. You have got to be better. And coach, this leads me to my question. $55 million a year, a very big cap hit. What are you going to do with Tua Tagovailoa in the offseason?
I feel like they should have benched him tonight. Yeah, and I feel like they should possibly consider doing it for the remainder of the season. The season's over, right? The playoffs are not even an option. You could say there was still a glimmer heading into this game, but at this point, you know what you have with Tua, right? And we can sit here and speculate as to what the reason is for the regression of Tua, but I mean, it's a shell of what we saw in the past. And like I said, I don't know if it has to do with the limited number of eligibles that they have out there, but even when he's running the ball, like I get that you had to kind of shift him to where he's protecting himself more, but he's been shifted so far that even when you need that extra yard, he's not getting. Like we've had 3 or 4 times this year where he is sliding down short of a first down that we really need. Um, so I think at this point, you know what you have in Tua. And I am not a Zach Wilson fan. I don't think that he is the answer by any means, but I do think that you need to do the due diligence to see what you have in him in game situations. And that applies to other positions as well to close out the season. Ewers, for me, you have years of control with him with his contract beyond next year or beyond this year. You don't have that with Zach Wilson. You kind of got to decide what you're going to do with him. And I do think that it would go, it's probably going to be the answer that all of us expect, that, he's not going to play well, but how bad is it going to look on this franchise if you don't see what you have in Zach Wilson, you roll it back in 2026 with Tua again, and Zach Wilson goes somewhere and becomes the next Sam Darnold or something like that. So for me, you got to decide, whether Zach Wilson is a quarterback that can get you through next year. Obviously, you have to figure out something long term. It's not Tua, it's not Zach Wilson, probably not yours, but you got to figure out how you're going to get through next year. And is that essentially suffering through another year with Tua, or do you decide at the end of the season that it's time to just, take your bad medicine, cut him loose? But if you're going to decide to do that, then a you have to have something for 2026. You can't, you know, let Zach Wilson go, cut Tua, and the only option that you have is Quinn Ewers. I don't think he's done nearly enough to be the only option coming back as a starting option next year. So yeah, I would see what you have in Zach Wilson, even though I don't expect a whole lot out of that.
I have a crazy idea, and this was brought up in OnlyFans. Joe Burrow for 3 first-round picks. You're saying no to that, and I know the answer why you're saying to that, because as much as everyone likes to see Joe Burrow play, he does take a lot of sacks that are his fault. You can say the offensive line is bad in pass pro as well. So is Tua's, but Joe Burrow is as injury prone as Tua Tagovailoa,
Yeah.
and that's probably not worth the 3 first-round picks, right? But that's the type of move which a franchise makes to finally have a franchise QB. You get rid of those 3 first-round picks, you're essentially getting rid of blue chip players across the board, right? For 2026, for 2027, for 2028, that are young, that are on team friendly deals, that you can control, that can help bolster the offensive line, that can help the wide receiver core, maybe improve the pass rush or the secondary. Or you give a chest and you trade away aging assets like Bradley Chubb, like Tyreek Hill, maybe throw in Tua to sweeten the deal and get a top 5 pick to potentially get Dante Moore. Or you take a flyer of a chance, trade back and grab Darian Mensah, who might be coming out from Duke. Or you just Russell Wilson to a Tagovailoa. Roll with Quinn Ewers, Zach Wilson, and they get you a high pick in 2027, and you grab potentially Arch Manning, or Lenora Sellers, or Kate Klubnik in that draft, whatever it is. But I think we're past where we're saying Tua is the guy next year. I think that's not a possibility. Okay, if he's the guy, he's going to be the bridge quarterback, or he's just the quarterback for the year where they're in a reevaluation phase for 2027, where they have a little bit more picks. They can make the team a little bit younger and really build this out and do a retooling of the roster.
Yeah, I would not do the Joe Burrow thing. I think that's a move that you make if you are a quarterback away from competing, and this team is not. Um, the when you look at the way the passing game is operating outside of Waddle, Achan, and Waller, there really is no number 2 receiver on the roster, right? So if you're doing something like that, then you're running it back with Tyreek Hill, um, the Bradley Chubb thing, right? You want to ship Bradley Chubb off, but then you're left with really just Chop Robinson in the edge room, right? Stuff like that. And I don't think that and I haven't watched a whole lot of the quarterbacks in the draft this year, but doesn't feel like there's a generational talent that you should trade a ton of draft picks to move up and get like that. For me, and as tough as it is to say it, like I feel like and the idea of trading all those first round picks for Burrow, right? It finally feels like this team is starting to build the right way, right? They're starting to build through the trenches. They're starting to invest some of those picks and have the guys that will actually get to the second contracts. If you go and you trade, 3 first-round picks for Burrow or multiple first-round picks to go get a rookie quarterback, then you're kind of pushing all your chips into that, a short run again. And I don't think that this is a team that is built to go for the short run. This is a team that still needs to continue to try to build that core out, right? And so I would prefer, if I was building this, I would figure out a way to get through 2026, whether that is Tua, whether it's Zach Wilson, whether it's you go out and get Kirk Cousins, right? Find
Do you think it's
some
Mike
way.
McDaniel though?
Well, that's another thing too. I mean, the more that I lean into it, I think it probably is. And I think that you get through 2026 and 2027 is maybe where you can invest those picks. But as far as Mike McDaniel, I seems like Stephen Ross really likes him. And I think the way that the team plays over these last 3 weeks will be a big indicator there as well, right? If you have a bunch of guys on the team that come out after the game tonight and into next week, and they're like, "F this, I'm out." We're having the Tyreek and Jalen Ramsey thing all over again. Then that could spell the end for McDaniel. But I think that if the team continues to play for him, even with essentially nothing to play for 2025, and they realize they're showing that they're still trying to build this um, the locker room, right? What I can't think of words I'm thinking of, right? You want to build the family, the chemistry into
You want to build a
2026.
culture of the team.
Culture, that's the word that I'm trying to find. Thank you, Hassan.
You
But
can't
that's
find that. You can't find that word in this current team. We talked about it this offseason. We talked about it
right.
throughout
Don't even know what it
the
looks like.
season. There is no culture in Miami. Now, we all thought, with a grain of salt, that it was coming to fruition, in the 4-game win streak. But and that's the thing too. Mike McDaniel is also very streaky. The last 3 years, he goes on big runs on wins, then loses 3-4 straight, then another win streak, then loses again 3-4 towards the end of the year. This is just something you can call this adversity. Adversity is opportunity, but you can't even do anything with the opportunities you're given, right? That's the culture the Miami Dolphins have. You can't make anything of the opportunities you are given. Take the game against Pittsburgh, for example. Cold weather. You're coming in to Monday Night Football where the Steelers have won 23 straight home Monday Night Football games. Tua is 2-9 in primetime games, 0-6 in the cold weather. Mike McDaniel is 4-19 when down by when trailing at halftime. It's also a primetime game in the road. Historically, they followed everything where they were going to lose. They were going to lose. It's what, 420 now. 420 when trailing at half. 0-7 in sub 40 degrees weather. Tua Tagovailoa is 2-10 in primetime. What else am I forgetting? I feel like I'm forgetting a bunch of other stuff too. But you had everything there. You had the opportunity there to control the narrative, and you let it squash you. That is the culture of the 2025 Miami Dolphins. I think we can all say that now after this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's we've gotten used to this as Dolphins fans of having a team that will keep reeling you back in over and over again, and thankfully we weren't in a win and get in situation where they flopped this time. At least this time it was a little bit earlier, a little less drama behind it. I do disagree a little bit about the culture piece of it, in the sense that again, if Stephen Ross has already basically decided that Mike McDaniel is returning, I think that you have seen a shift. And, again, we will see how strong that culture is these coming weeks to see whether they do stick together, because they've, shown to be a close knit team over this winning streak. So, does a loss derail that? Do we have players that are coming out and, speaking publicly? If we do, then that means that, again, like, Bradley Chubb talked about earlier this season, that they were just lying to us about the culture and they could be doing it again. But if they do, if they're able to bounce back and still finish the season strong, I still think that there is a base of a culture that you can still build in finishing up a lost season that could possibly carry over into 2026. And I don't, I'm sure that we, on not just a post game here, but as we get into the off season, our scouting the Fins, we will talk about the changes that we think will be made to the team. I don't think there's going to be a ton of changes. I don't know how much opportunity there is for that. And I kind of like some of the nucleus that they can bring back. So I think that you still have an opportunity where you can finish the season strong and still return a strong nucleus of it into 2026, which you didn't have coming into this year. You pointed out early in the season about just how many new pieces they had on the defense, and that kind of contributing to the slow start. If you can return a solid core of both the offense and the defense heading into next year, and this culture that they've built is a legitimate thing and carries over, right, then this could be something that builds into 2026. But it's obviously too early to tell that for sure.
Yeah. We'll see what the next 3 games look like up against the Cincinnati Bengals, the home finale up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the season finale up in New England. Now the Dolphins are playing for pride, for draft position, and for other players who could be on the chopping block or who may not be on the team for their next contract as an audition. Stick with us here on Scouting the Fins, also part of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast network, which is also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. As always, y'all, go Fins.